So as you know, this panel is on sustainable aviation, and we want to know how India is preparing for it, or is India prepared for it. So the first question on this would be that carbon emissions from the aviation sector is one of the most talked about topics when we talk about climate change. What steps are you taking in sustainable aviation, or are any measures being taken for sustainable aviation?
Well, sustainable aviation is on the top of the agenda as far as greenhouse emissions go. It is a global movement. So India is a part of the movement, and India has some commitments to it. As far as policy matters are concerned, we have a paper on it, and there are a number of organizations which are working towards enhancing the policies, helping the government, and the implementation part. Now, as you know, aviation contributes about 3%, and India, as such, as a country, is the third largest contributor towards the greenhouse emissions after United States and China, even though the quantity is less. But besides aviation, there are other areas which also contribute. So you cannot basically disconnect aviation from other areas, because it is a sustainable movement, a process which includes the collection, production of the alternate fuels, or sustainable aviation fuel, as we may say. And so we need contribution not only from the regulatory aspect, but from the society as well, because everybody has to contribute towards it to protect the climate.
So the second question we were talking about was that how do you make the engines more fuel efficient, and what are the steps that the airlines can take to revamp their fleet and make them more sustainable, and to have more sustainable options if alternate fuels is something that is a challenge today.
Well, alternate fuel will be a challenge. One, because of the availability of mass production of aviation sustainable fuel, and secondly, the cost. For example, typical cost as per a study from Amsterdam to New York, a $500 ticket, the price would increase by about $120 to $150. So who is going to pay for that? It will be passed on to the passenger, a 20-25% increase in the fare. So will it be acceptable or not? So how will the airline contribute to that? Now, the only way they can do it is bringing in newer aircrafts, new technology. There are a lot of old aircrafts flying, so we have something called a retrofit. You can change the engines, or the new technology engines, better airframes, reducing the weight, using better lighter plastics, using better flight management systems, satellite navigation. So these are the number of ways that the airline can help in reducing the cost. And sustainable aviation fuel can be mixed 20%, 50%, but there has to be a beginning from somewhere for a long-term introduction of sustainable fuel. It is not just a one-time exercise. So it is the whole system which has to contribute, and the airline is a part of it. Technology, artificial intelligence, and machine learning is helping every industry. So that is the future. Flight management systems and air traffic controllers, their systems are using artificial intelligence in slot management, how to guide aircrafts, time management, time-based arrivals and departures at airports, so that there is minimal wastage of fuel holding on ground and in air. So it is the intelligent use of technology. So if the airlines are unable to retrofit or change their engines, they need to have other means, basically, to help in reducing the emissions. Using sustainable fuel in the ground transportation. So the airlines have a lot to play in that. The ground transportation, in terms of the buses, the cars which are running inside the airport, the cargo loading vehicles. So all these use the fossil fuel. So they have to change over to sustainable. So these are the areas which can be easily switched without much effort. So that is the first thing you can do. There are maybe thousands of vehicles in all the combined vehicles in all the airports in India. So the first move is to introduce sustainable fuel in those vehicles, which is the easier part to do. And that also contributes because that comes under aviation. And how do you reach the airport? The fuel reaching the airport. So all those aspects have to be looked at. We have a lot of land with the airports, like the railways have done. All the land they have planted jatropha, through which they will produce sustainable fuel. Aviation, like Cochin Airport, is the first one to use solar power to power the entire airport because they have a lot of land. So every airport has single runway or multiple runways. There's a lot of land. So how do you use that land in a more productive way so that our returns not only affect the bottom line but also the climate? So we have to look at alternate ways. It is not just changing the engine technology. That is the simplest thing to do. But other tertiary areas, ancillary. So those also have to be. So the whole system has to move together. That is how it is done.
Right, sir. So you've covered most of the steps that the industry is taking. If there's any specific example that you would like to throw from a research and innovations perspective, where the sector is trying to become carbon neutral and drive performance as well, or whether it's about building engines for the future. If there's any insight on that, sir.
What I would like to speak is a kind of misnomer that bio sustainable fuel is the solution. It can be termed as a stopgap arrangement. So our final destination is electric or hydrogen powered aircrafts. But the implementation could take as long as 2040 or 2050. In the meanwhile, the first step is to mix the fuel, the jet aviation fuel, with biofuel in a certain percentage. Next is move on to 100% biofuel. So ultimately, we have to move to electric or hydrogen powered aircrafts. So now this kind of stopgap arrangement to slow down or to reduce the carbon footprint, it is quite an expensive proposition. It has to have a lot of capital outlay in terms of a couple of $billion, at least from Indian perspective. And if you see how is this fuel made? This fuel is made from basically waste is combined with the other wastes like oil, and then aviation fuel is produced. So it is a very complex procedure of collection, then segregation, then production, and then transport. India wastes about $14 billion of food produce every year. That is 40% of our agricultural produce is wasted because of the failure of cold chain. So the cold chain failure leads to such big losses. And to produce 22 million tons of aviation biofuel, we need about 160 tons of agricultural waste. So now if we already have so much of waste, which is degrading the water table and the environment. So on one hand, we are looking at saving the ozone layer, greenhouse emissions, but on the other hand, due to our failed cold chain production, the supply management, we are wasting 40% of the agricultural produce, which is damaging the water table, and basically deforestation is happening because of that. So I have made a couple of presentations to the government, to certain ministries, aviation ministers, how to enhance the connectivity, air connectivity, through smaller aircrafts reaching out to the smaller remote places, the mandis and the small farmers who produce high value perishable produce. How to get it from them by using unpaved runways, using modern technology like performance-based navigation, so that we don't need instrument landing systems or the ground-based navigation systems to guide us to the station and land. It is all based upon the aircraft's capability of flight management system. So we use satellite navigation to navigate and land the aircraft. So why not use that to reach and collect the produce or the waste? So it is all a part of the system. When you look at the whole system, the chain, we need to collect the waste or the produce to get it to a collection center wherein the production happens. So it is not a small task. So uh, the sustainable aviation fuel production will add about $2.8 billion to our yearly GDP, but we are losing $14 billion on account of this wastage. So it is all how do we balance all this? We can use technology, like I said, uh, the newer engines we have on the Boeings and the Airbus and the Embraers. Companies like GE are producing newer engines, Rolls-Royce is producing. So everyone is trying to contribute, but ultimately it comes to how much implementation happens on ground. So from the implementation perspective, what we see is that we have to uh, invest in technology and initial startup infrastructure. That is where the government comes in. And without that, the whole process is kind of slowed down, because yes, there is a white paper on flexibility of policy. So we say that we are flexible in terms of policies, making policies and implementation. But then at the end of the day, when there is a proposal, the first proposal which comes in is from a bigger lobby rather than from an in-house a new startup. So encouragement to the new startups is being given by the government, but we yet have to see anything substantial in terms of the greenhouse reduction of greenhouse gases and the production of sustainable aviation fuel. So this system, the whole system, cannot be disconnected from agriculture, because that is the major contributor towards the initial the product from which we produce sustainable aviation fuel. So if we combine the two, what we see is the infrastructure which has to be built in terms of transportation, which is the major deterrent or impediment right now. So there are good technologies in terms of engine development, but how do we get the fuel for a long-term solution? We have the capability to demonstrate, like one airline has done in India, a flight from Dehradun to Delhi based on a mixed fuel. So I really don't know what the exact mixture was, but they have demonstrated as a part of our commitment. But how do we sustain it? That is the question in terms of long-term production and uh, providing 100% sustainable aviation fuel. So it sounds good on paper, and it is good to talk on forums, but ultimately there is a gap in between which needs to be covered by various departments, or rather it has to be through the vision of the top policymaker who gets everybody together to make it happen.
Right, sir. So you mentioned about policymakers and using the existing infrastructure. The PM has stressed up on the fact that, or rather emphasized on making India and making India manufacturing hub. Uh, India has a great opportunity here. Is there a roadmap that you feel can be implemented for making India a manufacturing hub for the future when it comes to sustainability in aviation?
Well, the first step is production capability. We have the production capability. We have seen defense system productions by Mahindra Aerospace, and now Tata's have come up with defense aircraft manufacturing and other equipment. So it is not that we cannot produce hardware. We already produce software, and we have the ideas. It is only a collaboration of, say, build, operate, and transfer, whatever model we choose. But we have, India has the capability and the potential in every field to become the leader because of the numbers and uh, the heritage that we carry. So there is potential, but how to implement it is the question. On ground implementation has to be done not only by the policymakers but a collaborative decision making. In the past, we have seen like the great IT revolution, it was led by the private operators. The government came in later when they saw success. Same happened in the real estate. It was the private operators which took the initiative. Then, when the revenue started showing up, then the government came in. So, it has to be led by a collaborative forum, not just by lobbies, but by every section of the society. Like I emphasized, that agriculture is the biggest contributor, be it the waste. So the collection of the feedstock, about 1 million tons, has to be done to produce a certain quantity of biofuel. So Make in India starts from the home, wherein people produce 65% of India is producing crops. So it is Make in India starts from the home. It is a mindset that everybody has to contribute towards it. It is not just that a company comes in, a big company or a multinational, that they can do magic. So we have the capability and we are already contributing towards it. It is only that linking is not there. We are not able to link different processes and different streams together, and we are not able to leverage, take advantage of other industries. So cross industry, we cannot take advantage. So if it is aviation, we look in silos or think in silos. We do not look across. So cross cultural and cross industry, that thinking or coordination has to be done by at the top level. Aviation will look basically towards their own benefits and their commitments, whereas agriculture, rail, and shipping, they're also big contributors. Without a chain or without one of them missing, we cannot produce or achieve our goals. So it is Make in India, basically, for me, starts with every person who contributes to it. And it is not just a concept, but it's a way of life. It is a philosophy which has been put up, that Make in India to empower ourselves. Yes, we can do it, but how do we do it? The implementation is more important, because if every individual is performing their role, and we see that at the end of the day we don't achieve our objectives, so then basically the person is disheartened, demotivated. So when we look at performances, the resources you have, the abilities combined by motivation. If you have average resources and abilities, but you are highly motivated, you can still perform. But if you have low motivation and high on both, you cannot achieve it. So motivation is the key. So that is why Make in India is driven by the people of India. That is what my thinking is.
Right, sir. So earlier you talked about the Dehradun to Delhi flight on alternate fuel. That is something that has excited at least the sustainability community. And how can we champion this in this space? And if we have to champion it, how will the transition happen? And if the transition has to happen, what kind of challenges or collaboration that is required in this?
So we cannot jumpstart the whole thing, the process. If we look at the uh, the electrification, the industry started electrification of the trains. Now we have electric cars and buses. We have the electric ships and then electric aircrafts. So it is we learn from other industries. It is not that aviation is the leader. We learn from every industry. Uh, when we start aviation, the foundation is training. We have smaller aircrafts. In electric, if you see Rolls-Royce has just come out with an electric aircraft, a small aircraft. Every other, Brazil has produced an electric aircraft. Turkey is going to produce. So we is starting up their own production with an electric aircraft, a smaller aircraft. So first transition should have been the training. We have maybe more than 100 training aircrafts where pilots learn to train. So that is the place where this fuel is used. So once we use fuel in training aircraft, so the mindset of people changes that yes, and then people start thinking differently. So right now it is driven from the top that we are supposed to do globally. The policies are made and it is coming down. So we have a vision, policy, procedure, put it to practice. But who has to put it to practice? The people on ground. And the most important part of any system is the feedback which comes. Does it work or not work? How do we make it more efficient? So people sitting in ivory towers are not able to visualize or understand these nitty-gritties. So the feedback has to come from people on the ground, those who actually implement. So those who implement will be people flying the smaller aircrafts, which are larger in number. So any industry, when they start out, they need more and more data. More and more data will come when we start using this fuel in a larger number of aircrafts. So the number of aircrafts, if we have 100 aircraft, if we even use 50 aircrafts dedicated to aviation fuel, sustainable fuel, then we have more data coming in. And slowly then we can progress on to the larger aircrafts. So that is the way you progress normally. We have demonstrated our capability by flying one aircraft, Q400, Bombardier Q400 from Dehradun. So yes, it can be done, and globally it is being done. But how do we take the lead? We take the lead by building a strong foundation. We need institutions who are dedicated towards sustainable aviation fuel and the management of the whole process. So unless we have institutions thinking like that, we cannot produce people who then join other industries with expertise. So how do we produce experts without institutions? It is basically from outsourced knowledge. Whatever knowledge we get from other countries in terms of loan or transfer of technology. So that is the only way. But we are not producing our own generation who is thinking in terms of producing more sustainable, or we could come up with something new rather than following the West. So leaders have said, look east. They've always done it historically. We have come up with something new, innovative in times of difficulties. But India has been the hub of innovation. So institutions need to be built. So in the beginning, I said we have a capital outlay, not only for institutions and infrastructure, but to train people and get subject matter experts on these. Not only scientists, but in other fields like aviation engineering, training, So people have to start thinking. The thinkers have to be produced in aviation for that. So it is not basically tinkering or use of the tools, innovative tools, but innovative ways of thinking have to be introduced, which the capability we have. It's only getting people together, like-minded people together, and initiating discussions and debates. So unless that is the purpose of having institutions, when people debate a topic, thrash it out, question it, and then come up with a solution for a long term. You cannot have a short-term stopgap arrangement. So if we have to move towards hydrogen powered aircraft, then we should have a long-term goal and a short-term, how do we sustain for the next 20, 30 years using a mixture of sustainable fuel, which also uses our agricultural waste to basically, we are solving two problems basically by coming up with this. So we need more thinkers and innovative people, not only just technology.
Right, sir. So we've got most of the answers. Anything else that you would like to add, sir, that you felt that we can mention in the whole sustainable conversation?
Like I said, we need a roadmap, a long-term roadmap, not just aviation, but other industries, like we have the environment or the energy management system. So we need and contributes towards it. So the coordination process, first a roadmap has to be laid. Right now we have a white paper, 23-page white paper. We check all boxes as far as commitment to uh, the the global carbon reduction movement is concerned, 2050 or 2030. But that is just a commitment. We are doing it for the sake of it. But in real terms, we need a long-term energy management plan, a roadmap. And aviation is one aspect of it, which contributes towards it. That is what my thinking is. So unless that is drawn for long term, we cannot have a sustainable program. Like sustainable is a very commonly used term. Sustainable, we need a anti-fragile system. Now, a sustainable system can break. Uh, so we look at systems which are resilient. But at the end of it, resilience also doesn't pay back in the long term. We need anti-fragility, wherein we can handle changes and breakdowns and evolve fast, but we can also learn from the changes. So anti-fragility means that next time the same mistake should not happen, or we should not fall into the same trap. So we should know the shortcomings. So if using sustainable aviation fuel is not a long-term solution, what are the shortcomings? So we should be aware of the positives, the pros and cons. So right now, everybody is talking all about the pros, but nobody's talking about the cons. So how do those negative aspects affect long term? So that has not been taken. So maybe after 10 years, we say, no, it is not working. So unless we have an institution which is measuring the performance, we cannot say that we have succeeded. So yes, we are going through the motions, checking all boxes, but we need to have a bigger, proper roadmap and thinking for that.
He was adding his input on how on sustainability, on what are the steps or measures that one can take in order to make the aviation community more sustainable.
Yeah. So basically, summing up my thoughts, everything starts from a mindset. So it is not the policymakers or the top management of the airlines who are responsible for reduction of carbon emission, but everybody, even the ATC officer who is in charge, has to have that thinking that if I reduce the track miles of an aircraft, or if I reduce the holding pattern on an airport, I am adding to my contribution towards reduction of greenhouse gases. A pilot who goes out of the way for track reduction, for asking for direct routings, or expedites his arrival safely, is also contributing. So not just ATC officers, pilots, but every person. So it is a thinking, a mindset. So when we have a roadmap, a long-term plan, it has to include every industry which contributes, not just aviation. As I've said, agriculture, we have to produce, and we have to collect the feedstock for production of the fuel. So how do we transport? So transportation can be done through the road or mass transportation through railways. So everybody contributes. It is not just aviation fuel. So aviation fuel comes normally to the ports or from the refineries by road or through pipelines. So aviation is not a standalone industry. There are many offshoots or links to this. So a long-term roadmap needs to be drawn for a combined industry level thought process wherein institutions are built and subject matter experts are trained, so that the next generation which comes in is thinking not only about saving money, but saving the planet in terms of energy conservation or reduction of greenhouse gases. So it is a mind shift basically. So a roadmap has to look at the mind shift, not just a technological shift or a production shift or the capital outlay. So it is basically a generational thinking mind shift. So that is what uh, my basic thought process is. And that's how I would like to recap the whole talk.
Thank you so much for your time,
Okay.
sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Take care, sir.